Trauma's always been something that I gravitate towards people in trauma. In that aspect, like, it's hard to hear what people go through. I've had multiple times where I sit in a counseling session and I will say, God, I don't understand why you're letting this happen. How can I help this person feel like you're a good God when I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, why would God let this happen? It was a lot of just like surrendering it to the Lord. For me, what that really looked like was, if it's for your will and it's your heart will change my heart. My life has been rocky for a lot of it. Like, I can relate to a lot of hardship. I can relate to suicide. I can relate to emotional abuse, like manipulation. I relate to all that. And when the Lord saved me, I'm so grateful because I never felt ashamed of my story. I was like, no, this is what happened to me. Like, this is really cool that the Lord saved me from this.
I'm curious, from your perspective, you get the chance, I think, to get a glimpse into many of the burdens that young adults today are facing as they're coming to you to seek counsel and help, and probably some of their harder moments. What's weighing on your heart as you kind of evaluate the landscape, and yeah, how's that impacting you being in the role that you're in? That can't be easy.
Yeah. There's so many different ways I can take this. And even right now, I'm wrestling. I'm like, okay, is this really what I'm going to say?
Hey, welcome back to the Even You podcast, where we empower ordinary people to say yes to extraordinary purpose. Mariah, how's it going today?
Good. How are you, Scott?
Good. Happy Thanksgiving coming up tomorrow.
Can't believe it.
I know. So excited. Hey, what's your take on families celebrating Thanksgiving on days other than actual Thanksgiving?
It feels wrong if you're not also celebrating on Thanksgiving.
Do you really enjoy the turkey that much if it's not Thursday of Thanksgiving? I don't think so.
Does anybody really like turkey?
My family is talking about doing Thanksgiving this weekend after Thanksgiving. It just doesn't feel right. So I just want to get your take. That's another episode coming to you. But today's episode, I'm super excited about, really because it was a cool opportunity to get to know one of your really best friends and from back in the day. Tell us more about our guest.
Yeah, so we got the opportunity to sit down with Freddie Amos. She works for Live Original. It's a ministry in Louisiana. And it was such a fun time getting to talk with her and just hear her kind of recount her story.
Yeah.
So really excited for you guys to hear that.
Awesome. We'll check out this episode of the Even You podcast.
Well, Freddie, thank you so much for having us. This is fun.
Yeah.
Freddie was my freshman year roommate at Auburn.
That's
and
awesome.
Junior and senior. And we were in each other's
crazy.
weddings. So
Wow.
safe to say.
Mariah was my
She's the
maid
best
of
friend.
honor.
That's awesome.
We
Here we are, full circle.
So welcome to our conversation.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here for the reunion of Freddie and Mariah.
Yeah, this is just like our friendship right here.
That's
You just
great.
get to be a part of it.
Yeah, let me know how I can help.
You're here.
Yeah, you guys need a drink or anything, or water or coffee? Okay.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Well, this is fun. This is exciting. We have just so much that we want to talk to you about, and just your story and all that God has done in your life. It's been really fun as a friend to get to sit on the sideline and see all that God has called you to here in West Monroe and at Live Original, and just in your career and life, and now mom. And so I think it'd be really fun to just start by you kind of sharing a little bit of your story and how you got here. And
So freshman year, that means you went to Auburn also,
Mhm.
but you grew up in Dallas, I understand.
I did.
How does a Dallas girl end up in Auburn?
I always get
and
that
all that, yeah.
question. And I wish it was a cooler story than it is, unfortunately. I was in Zoe's one afternoon with my dad. I was a junior looking at colleges, and randomly his fraternity brother from Baylor walked in and was like, my daughter just graduated from Auburn. And my dad was like, oh, cool, Auburn. I'm scheduling a tour right now for us to go visit.
No.
Literally in that Zoe's is when we decided we were going to go visit Auburn. Visited Auburn my junior year in February. It was the most disgusting, grossest day in Auburn, probably that I've ever experienced in the 6 years I ended up living there.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And so to me, that was like, all right,
I could
this
do
is the
this.
place I need to be. I know. Did you even know that?
Also, February, it's like not football season or not. Yeah, it's like, what's going on in February in Auburn?
Well, the reason why I did it February in Auburn is because I went to Trinity Christian Academy,
Uh-huh.
TCA in Dallas, and our spring break is in February. So we went on spring break, which again is weird that spring break is in February.
Yeah.
That's a TCA thing.
Okay.
That's a TCA thing. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
went to TCA, graduated 2016. I had a good experience at TCA. I really think that it was pivotal for me to grow up in a Christian school.
Mhm.
Did I really know God while I was at TCA? No. I thought I did. It was very just like the cultural thing to do, the
Yeah.
cool thing to do. I'm at a Christian school, like we go to chapel We had close ties with a lot of people that are really involved in churches. My family, not so much. Excuse me. And so it was like, okay, I'm a believer, right? But had my own wrestles, had my own things. But it wasn't until my senior year where I really came to know the Lord through a crazy series of events. Actually, on our senior trip, TCA senior trip in Colorado, out of all places. And that's really where I met the Lord. And really, my life changed my senior year of high school, which is a really scary time for your life to change and for you to start following the Lord. But it was great for me. It really grew me. And then freshman year, decided to room with this random girl from California.
Yeah. Even weirder, it ended up in Auburn. Yeah.
Yeah, that was even weirder. It was like, you're from Dallas? How crazy. You're from California? That's even crazier.
Weird.
Yeah, y'all are weird. And you're roommates? And how do you know each other? Because you have to understand, like, Auburn is a bubble in the sense that people only go to Auburn if they're from, like, Alabama.
Yeah.
So we were the odd ones out, for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're here in West Monroe, Louisiana. You work with Live Original now on staff, counseling people I know and contributing in other ways. How did you end up at Live Original?
It is like such a wild story. So never thought I would leave Auburn, honestly. So graduated in 2020 from Auburn. Let me backtrack. All of college, I never knew what I wanted to do. I had no direction of I'm going to be a counselor. I did not have any clue where my life was heading, which was a little naive. I kind of just took it moment by moment, day by day. But now looking back, that was the Lord's blessing because I didn't have this stress over like, what's my next step? It was just like, okay, whatever happens, happens. Decided to intern at a church my junior year. Mariah interned together. That was really fun. Started dating my husband junior year as well. And all these things started like kind of falling into place of like, okay, I kind of got to get serious about what does my path and future look like? Like, what am I going to do when I graduate? What are we going to get married? Am I going to like live by myself and be in Auburn? What does this look like? I take an internship and I fall in love with my internship site. And they were like, you should consider counseling, which is funny because my mom told me I should be a counselor when I was in middle school. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. That sounds boring. I remember saying, I cannot fathom sitting in a room with different people at times and just talking about their problems. That sounds horrible. That's what I do. Which I love it now. So it's just so funny. And so I was just really confused. And then they're like, here's some direction, maybe try it out. My senior year is when I decided that I was going to go to grad school. So I went from no direction to I'm going back to school for 2 years. And I said, I'm only going to apply to Auburn. So if I don't get in anywhere else, I'm not going to go to grad school. So I only applied to Auburn's mental health counseling program. I got in. But again, I had no like direction of like, okay, what's the next step after that? Obviously 2020 is when COVID happened. So a lot changed and had to do school online, had to figure out what that looked like. I still stuck with grad school. There was, a lot of challenges in the midst of it. About a year in, I am with Parker, my husband, Sadie, and then her husband, Christian. We're all hanging out. And we're actually in Florida, like sitting in a hot tub, just hanging out, talking, catching up on life because my husband and I are still in Auburn. Sadie and Christian had already moved back to Louisiana, here in West Monroe. And she was just asking me about grad school, asking me about like, how is it going? What do you want to do? And at that point, I had said I wanted to work with children and sexual abuse, like very specific, nothing related to Live Original, the ministry. And she just kind of was like, well, if you ever wanted a job, like we have such a need for Christian counselors in our area. And I literally remember thinking, I was like, that's really sweet that she offered me a job. I'm probably not going to do that because I want to work with kids and sexual abuse. And
also probably didn't picture yourself moving to Louisiana at the time either. No.
And then she offered it again. And I was like, okay, maybe I need to listen to this. Maybe I need to think about this. So we go back, Parker and I do, and he was like, that was crazy that she offered you a job. And I'm like, oh, I know, how funny. Like I'm so flattered. And we literally prayed about it for 6 months before we said yes, because it was going to be a huge life change for us. My husband's from Auburn. We thought we were going to be there forever. And to be honest, like I didn't really want to live in Louisiana. I was like, okay, I mean, maybe Dallas, maybe Auburn. Louisiana was never on my radar. And so for 6 months, I remember like I had a note card of very specific scriptures I would pray every single morning of like, okay, I'm not going to move until you tell me to move. I'm going to do what you call me to do. Give me direction, give me patience, and like speak to me. It was not a quick process, obviously, 6 months. But it was very clear. Like after we talked to people, some people were like, no, you guys shouldn't do that. And I was like, why not? That feels like what the Lord is telling me to do. So even that no was like a no, yes, this is a yes. So that's a long story of how I got here. Took the job in May of 22 and have been here 2 years now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure it flies by.
Flies by.
That's cool.
Flies by.
What did that like process of confirmation from the Lord look like? I feel like people often say, I heard God tell me this, or I found clarity here. But like practically for you, what was the clarity that he gave you to say, okay, I don't really even know if we want to do this, but we'll take one step and just say yes.
I think I had to be really patient with the Lord and with myself, because also in that timeline, I was not going to be able to move for over a year. So she offered me a job in the middle of grad school, which was exciting because I was like, wow, I already have a possible job offer, but we did know we had so much time to make a decision. So we did have a lot of time to sit and really pray and bring people in. A lot of it, even though we were married, looked like me doing it on my own and him doing it on his own, because I didn't want us to negatively influence each other or make it be a situation where I was trying to convince him to move and he was trying to convince me to stay. Like we really both separately wanted to hear from the Lord. And I remember a lot of mornings like feeling a yes, feeling a no, feeling confused, feeling, okay, but I really do feel passionate about like sexual abuse, like children's sexual abuse. What do I do that? Can I integrate? Practically, is this going to work? Like, how does my license transfer over? What does that look like? What happens? What is Parker going to do when we move to Louisiana? Is he going to get a job? Is he going to work remote? So it was a lot of just like surrendering it to the Lord. And I know like that word is such a strong word that we use a lot in the Christian faith. But for me, what that really looked like was like every morning just praying about it and saying like, I don't know. There's parts of me that do want to go. There's parts of me that don't want to go. But at the end of the day, like it's about what you want me to do. It's not about what I want to do, because if it's for your will and it's your heart will change my heart in it. And I will learn that this is what I want to do. And that was more towards the beginning when I was like, well, this is maybe not what I had ideally pictured. And then when I started getting really excited about the ministry, I started getting really excited about, gosh, I get to work in a Christian environment and counsel girls that maybe know the Lord, maybe don't know the Lord, but I operate under a ministry. That really excited me. That gave me a lot of peace. And so God really opened up a lot of the practical doors, and he opened up my heart to be really excited about it. And that's ultimately what made us go, okay, this is from the Lord. But I remember it had been a few months and I looked at my husband and I said, okay, I just want you to know I have my answer from the Lord.
Wow.
And I'm so like, I'm going to give it you, like, I'm going to let him tell you when it's your time to know.
Was he like, what is it though? Tell me, give me.
I think he knew because I was like getting really excited about it. But it was also hard for him because he wanted to live in Auburn for his entire life. He's an Auburn boy through and through. And so I also didn't want to like create a force of resentment. If I was like, this is what the Lord's telling us to do, I wanted to give him that opportunity to lead, but also let God tell him so that he had that confidence in his heart as well.
That's awesome.
Oh, it's been awesome. We learning more about Live Original and the incredible impact through all the different events, resources, different platforms, content that comes out. As you counsel, and I know you contribute to some of the content as well, clearly investing in young women in really meaningful ways. What is your motivation for that? Where does that come from? Or how did God cultivate in you a story that you are eager to influence others with?
It's really my own story. I come from a divorced family. I love my dad. I love my mom. They have been great parents to me. But I struggled when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I had depression, was diagnosed with depression when I was in middle school. I I remember a lot of my life just being sad, feeling lonely, feeling by myself. I went to counseling once and I hated it. Maybe the reason why I never wanted to be a counselor.
Yeah.
I dated a lot of, well, I don't say a lot. I dated and it was really unhealthy for a long time. And so I was that girl that I see a lot of, like the pain, the suffering, the confusion, the isolation. How do you like have healthy relationships? Where does your identity go? What happens when you don't know the Lord? That was really my story. And when the Lord saved me, I'm so grateful because I never felt ashamed of my story. I was like, no, this is what happened to me. Like, this is really cool that the Lord saved me from this. And so it was a really automatic, like, I want people to know that this can happen to them too, because I am not an exception.
Yeah.
Like, I am in the masses of people that don't know the Lord and then get accepted into his family because I've said yes to what he's done for me. And so that was really impactful for me to go, okay, what can I contribute to the ministry my entire life? I don't really have to pull much because my life has been rocky for a lot of it. Like, I can relate to a lot of hardship. I can relate to suicide. I can relate to bad relationships, emotional abuse, like manipulation. I relate to all that.
Wow.
So that's not only what I bring into the counseling room, but also like through the app and just being able to host mental health breakouts at the conference that we're about to have. It's like, it's just all in me already. It's my story.
That's powerful.
Mhm.
I'm sure that makes you an incredible sister and friend to those in need, because that's
Thank you.
the mission of LO.
Yeah. I think it's cool too, when we are vocal with our testimony, it gives purpose to what God has asked us and chosen for us to walk through, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
But if we are ashamed of it and we keep it to ourselves, I think that's where the enemy just gets to like run rampant. And it becomes, I think that's where shame festers.
Yeah.
And so I think it's such a powerful thing that for you, you're like standing firm and being like, yeah, I made these bad decisions and I did not live perfectly, but God is so much greater and he's redeemed my story in my life so that I can influence so many other people and say, hey, you're not alone in that. Like, you don't have to be isolated like I was. We can walk through this together and there is hope on the other side. So I think that's really cool. I'm curious, when like the Lord really captivated your heart senior year, from there, was it always just like peachy clean and all the bad decisions were behind you and like your faith was easy, life was easy, it was just good getting you to where you are today? Or like, have there been rocky roads and missteps that you look back and you're like, oh wow, I've learned a lot from that?
I'm laughing only because you know the ins and outs of my life in college. And in a short way, no. Like, it was not rainbows and butterflies from the moment I said yes. From the moment I said yes is the moment God was like, okay, we're starting to test your faith because I want you to really know what it means to follow me and not be cultural anymore. Because I had very cultural moments at worship nights, at church youth revival moments. You know, it's like, oh yes, I raised my hand, I want to know the Lord. The next day it's like the continual back into my old patterns. So literally the moment I truly believe I accepted Jesus into my heart, it was like within minutes, like, here's a test. Are you going to be okay if I take everything from you? And I see that now as loving, and I saw it as loving then, but it was a lot harder to accept. I was completely having to step out in faith and step away from my friend group, step away from a relationship that I was in. And so there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of things I kept going back to, honestly. I think it was really healthy for me to be able to step into Auburn right away, in a year, I guess, more so time frame, because I was able to be like, okay, my start over is coming soon. Like, this is hard now, but I'm about to really start over. I can create Christian friends. I can, step into that. But it didn't happen as easily as I thought it was going to. The temptation was still there. The struggles were still there, going back and forth into a really unhealthy relationship for like a year. But truly, like, the people around me really helped. And that's what I even now am thinking back to, is like the Lord's provision and hand in putting me with Mariah as my roommate. I mean, the odds of us rooming together were like zero. We did not know each other at all. It was so random. But for someone like Mariah to have such a strong faith and then be with me when I was still learning about faith was really impactful. We started going to church together. So it was like an automatic friend, an automatic community aspect that was great. And then sophomore year came. And sophomore year was like, honestly, for me, worse than freshman year. I really did things that were not a part of my character. Never did I go out and drink. And that's what I was doing. And I had such loving friends to literally sit down with me and say, this is not you. And that was some of the hardest conversations I've ever had. But I remember like my pastor coming up to me, putting his arm around me after church one day and said, we know this isn't you and we love you and we just want you to be better because this is not who you are. And multiple friends doing the same thing. And that was huge because I wasn't condemned. I wasn't shamed for falling back into old patterns and even falling into patterns I'd never done before. But I had to learn grace to a new extent because at this point I was actively calling myself a believer and I had consequences for my actions that were really hard and painful. I was supposed to speak at a women's event and I was asked to not because I was going out and drinking. And they were like, it's not because, we don't love you, but we don't want to give a girl the wrong impression to see you on stage if she's also seen you do other things.
Yeah, that's hard.
It was hard, but it made me really go, okay, what's important to me? Like, is it my faith or is it the faith that the world wants me to have?
Yeah. You used the word earlier, like tests, like test of your faith. And I love that because now we see you with this incredible opportunity. And it's easy on this side to be like, man, look at the job, look at the home we have in West Monroe, look at the ministry. But it's almost like God was seeing along the way and crafting you like an instrument to be used to say, is this going to be a worthy instrument? I think about the verse that talks about not being an instrument of wickedness, but an instrument of righteousness. And it's kind of a crossroads moment to say, hey, here's this ministry opportunity, this platform, and here's this partying lifestyle. Which do you choose? You could kind of go either way.
Yeah.
And I hear you saying it was on your heart to say, man, I don't want to lose this because this is really meaningful to me deep down.
I love that community is a big piece of your story too. I think in church circles, people often talk about like, you need people around you, you need community, but this is like such a perfect example of you had people like step into the depths of your sin with you and say, we know you and we know that you are better than this. And we know that you are like called to higher than this and you are capable of so much more than this. And I think like that is something so encouraging and so needed. And in college is so sweet and so amazing. But I think even now, like sitting in this chair, I think that's something that my heart longs for is the community of being so known like I was in college. And I think it takes time as adults to build that.
Absolutely.
But I think it is so important because we're not perfect. Like just because we love God and are saved doesn't mean that we're not going to encounter temptation or things aren't going to get hard. And I think you need those people almost like lane lines or bumpers in bowling of like, hey, no, come back to the middle. You're okay. Like come back. It's gentle and it's kind, but it's loving and it course corrects. And I think that for me is something I think about right now and I'm actively praying about. And I think it's a cool testament in your story. I love that.
Community is so important for so many different aspects and reasons. And I recognized like in college was a time in my life where I felt the most seen and known. And then getting into adulthood, I was like, why do I not feel as connected with my friends? And I had to do a lot of self-searching to realize like it was me. It was not them. Like I wasn't letting people in as much because not that I was ashamed to tell them my story, but it was almost like, okay, I'm an adult now, like a mini identity crisis. Like, who am I to these people? I know who college me was. I know who vulnerable, like deep Freddie was, but is it okay to be that as an adult? Like, is it okay to go super deep and be the deep friend that wants to ask all the really hard intentional questions? But I had to come back to like, yeah, that's my gift from the Lord. Like I can be that friend for other people and it might make them uncomfortable, but that's a good thing. And so also including myself in that community piece to go, I'm the type of friend that someone else also needs, and I need that as well. But it was a lot of self-searching to go, okay, as a friend in adulthood, how does that work? Because it's very different than in college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is.
I'm curious, from your perspective, you get the chance, I think, to get a glimpse into many of the burdens that young adults today are facing as they're coming to you to seek counsel and help, and probably some of their harder moments. What's weighing on your heart as you kind of evaluate the landscape, and yeah, how's that impacting you being in the role that you're in? That can't be easy.
Yeah, it's not. It's gotten harder as I've created more relationships with my clients and hearing a lot of the really hard things. And in grad school, it was hard too. It was hard to hear stories. It was hard to hear about, abuse and neglect of children. And then hearing like problems that are different, like, oh, I'm anxious about a test. And then also the session after hearing about abuse. It's like, it's hard to go, okay, these are not different. God cares about them the same. It's hard to relate to both of those clients in the same way. But to answer your question of like, what burdens me the most, honestly, there's so many different ways I can take this. And even right now, I'm wrestling. I'm like, okay, is this really what I'm going to say? But honestly, it's domestic abuse.
Really?
Because, and that's not a pretty answer. That's not like the depression, anxiety, like but it's the trauma.
Yeah.
It's like trauma's always been something that I really I gravitate towards people in trauma to want to help them and support them. And so in that aspect, like, it's hard to hear what people go through. And I've had multiple times where I sit in a counseling session and I will say, God, I don't understand why you're letting this happen. Like, I don't even understand. How can I help this person feel like you're a good God when I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, why would God let this happen? And so it really humanizes me because I don't have all the answers as a counselor. I'm also just as confused and broken and sinful and messed up as the person sitting in front of me. But I think what hurts me the most is when people are just mistreated, and that really comes from trauma, and then their brains rewire to always be in fight or flight. That's one of the hardest things for me to see, is when someone always feels frightened by everything in all their surroundings, and knowing at the same time this is not going to be really sweet for a lot of people to hear. Counselors really can't do anything about that. We are not the healer. We are not the ones that are going to make everything better. I am not God. I can't take away their problems. They have to wrestle with that with the Lord, and my job is to sit with them and listen with them and ultimately surrender them back to the Lord.
You also have stories of individuals that you've seen find healing and hope by surrendering to the Lord.
Yeah.
And does that keep you going, or what is that like? Do you
It
remember
does.
those? Or
It's so funny you asked that. I literally just had a client get baptized not too long ago, and that's really sweet. That's really special to even know. Like, I really don't think I played a part in that, to be honest. But just to be able to hear what she's been through and then know that she was able to find the Lord, it's cool to sit and be a part of. And even when it's not that big and grand of like death to life, but it's sitting with the client and they go, oh, I get it now. Like, I don't have to be treated that way. Oh, I realize I can control my emotions. I realize I don't need sessions as often as I thought I did because I'm a lot more stronger mentally. Those are the things that keep me going.
Awesome.
And even in the hard moments, like with my clients, I really just feel like the burden and the call to sit with them and be the hands and feet of Jesus in that moment to them. And I think a lot of times about Jesus, like he had to feel and experience so much pain from his friends. And so that's a connection for me too, to go, okay, Jesus, like, you felt this while you were on earth. And so I need that strength. I need that compassion. I don't want to burn out. I don't want to have compassion fatigue and throw away these problems, because you never did when your disciples were like asking you questions that we can sometimes read and go, are you kidding? You're asking Jesus that question? Like, he never came back with a harsh response. It was always gentle and compassion. And so yes, there are still so many great moments. I love my job. I get to do really incredible things with my job, but it's also really hard.
Yeah.
It's also really hard.
Imagine.
think, thank you for the reality of that, of it's really cool. And God has called you to something that is really sweet.
Mhm.
And you have an opportunity to influence so many people, but also it's not always easy and it's not always pretty and it's hard. And there's an emotional burden that comes with that. And yeah, I appreciate that. I think when you wanted to do child counseling, and God obviously was like, hey, I got something else for you. Like, how did God grow your passion and excitement for what you're doing now? Because I think we often have the view of, I need to follow where my passion is. I think that's kind of a lot of what the coaching is in career of, well, what are you passionate about? What are the things that motivate you and get you going? And this wasn't necessarily what you thought in your mind,
Yeah.
but God said, I have a better plan
Yeah.
for you. What did that look like of growing in your excitement?
I think I have always enjoyed relationships. I have always enjoyed seeing people come out of hardship and being in healing. And so I had to break it back down. Like, okay, I'm a deep thinker. I question things a lot. And so in that strength, I was like, okay, why do I care so much about the child sexual abuse? Like, what is it about that? Because I know it's not what I'm listening to, because that's hard. Like, no one wants to listen to that. And it was to help people get out of hardship and to be a part of the healing process. And then I said, okay, if I can be a helper in any capacity, that's a good thing. That's still doing what I love to do. Yeah. And just because I'm saying no to it now doesn't mean I'm saying no to it for forever. Like, just because right in this minute, God is shifting my passion in my heart to something else that I'm still passionate about. Like, I love sisterhood. I love friendships. I love helping girls and women too. So it wasn't like out of the blue. This wasn't something that I never thought about. I just saw my life in a really specific direction. And I kind of had to humble myself and bring it to the Lord and go, okay, maybe this was a me idea. Maybe this wasn't a you idea. And so what does it now look like for it to be, what do you want with my passion? Because my passion ultimately is to glorify you and to serve you. So if that's ultimately my passion, how are you going to direct then what I feel called to do?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Thinking back about your story too and how God has kind of equipped you for the things you're doing now. Understand, I heard before that you've kind of done some overseas mission work. Tell us more about that. I'm curious, and kind of how that's impacted you.
Yeah, I love going overseas. I have always loved to be on the ground and seeing how different people live and experience their culture.
Yeah.
And so getting to go to Cuba and then China with a different ministry was like so eye-opening one for me. Really made me look more inward in the sense of like, what's not important, what is important. And it really humbled me to go, okay, God, you're so much bigger than like America, my Dallas bubble, my Auburn bubble. Like, you're a God that serves all people and all people serve you. I just was so amazed by it. And it really opened up my eyes. I actually think about this a lot, which is just really crazy of the Lord. Like, when I went to Cuba, I wouldn't say that I really knew the Lord. We actually went to Cuba because we were supposed to go to Africa on a different mission trip, actually with my school. And it had to be canceled because there was a lot of persecution of Christians going on in like a 100-mile radius.
Wow.
And so my dad, I was really disappointed. And my dad was like, let's go, on a different mission trip, you and I. And I remember, again, I'm not really a Christian at this point. I don't know what the gospel means, like the actual word. But the first person I go to, I'm talking with them and I'm like, can I tell you some good news? I have good news to share with you. And my dad later on that day, because we were separated, he was like, how would you start conversations? I said, well, I would just say, hey, I have good news to share with you. And then I like become a believer. And I know that gospel literally means good news. And I just
you didn't know that at the time.
No, I didn't know that at the time. And
Cool.
that was cool because even then God used me because I was obedient enough to say yes, even though I didn't know the full story. And like, I didn't know really where I stood. It just showed me like, okay, I'm really just a vessel. Like anything I have to offer is only because it's by Jesus and by what he wants to say through me. So, I mean, it's really not me. There is a lot of wrestling and struggling in Cuba. There's a lot of wrestling and struggling in China. China, I was there for 6 weeks.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, so I like lived in China.
Yeah.
And that was a really amazing experience. Really changed my faith. Really changed the way I see presenting the gospel. But also brought like challenges too of how do I go back to America and tell people about Jesus that already know about Jesus. It's way easier to tell people about Jesus that don't know Jesus.
For sure.
And so that's been honestly an internal struggle that I still struggle with. Is like, it's way easier to say to someone, do you know Jesus? And then say no, than them say yes and not really know Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about what you saw just with people in these other countries and what they're going through, or and the way that you serve people now, I mean, does that connect for you at all, I guess, or the condition of people, or the people that need support, need the gospel, need community, like we talked about earlier? I guess, how does that like shape the work that you do now, the ministry, having seen more the global body or the global people?
Yeah. 2 stories come to mind. One was when we were in China, randomly, I mean, it's China, so we're not like in the American bubble, finding someone that just happened to be a Christian, that someone was going to share the gospel with. And when we left, his heartbreak was really evident because he wanted that community and he couldn't have it publicly like we could all have it. And then another story that sticks out is the awe of someone seeing scripture for the first time was really, really eye-opening. Just the excitement and the wonder and the like, I literally have a picture on my phone and I think of it sometimes and I look back to it and she was like, is that like, what is that? And I gave her my Bible and she's just like staring at it so in awe. And to me, I'm like, this is just the Bible.
Yeah.
But to her, it's like,
God's word.
oh, this is God's word.
Yeah.
Like, this is a God who gave this to us. And so it's really just has shaped the way I think, without even me realizing how I do approach scripture and how I continually need to approach scripture of like, it's God breathed, it's God's words. Like, God has given us community. Don't take that for granted. God has given us his word. Don't take that for granted. It's given me such an appreciation for what I do have by the grace of God.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded of your story. You said earlier, you kind of grew up in a Christian culture, a Christian school. And so some of it was just going with the flow. I experience the same thing when I go to other cultures where there's a very small percentage of Christians. And so those who are following Christ, it's not something taken for granted. The few others who they know who are also Christians, or the one Bible or the one chance they have to gather together, it's really special for them. It's always humbling. Like, man, how much do I take this for granted, that with the access that I have all the time?
Yeah. And it has strengthened my faith too, to go, okay, like, what do I really believe? Like, when I come back, what am I really standing for? Am I going to fall back to the culture? Or like, these people are being persecuted for their faith and I am scared to say something, ask someone if they know the Lord. It's like, I heard someone say it recently. It's, how often are you putting your reputation online for Jesus? And I thought about that so much. It's like, I need to be putting my reputation on the line daily for Jesus, because that's how worth it is. But I don't, because it's just more comfortable to not. So tying all that in with overseas missions has really opened my eyes.
It's cool.
I remember on my, it was my first week. I think it was my second day working at East West. I got invited to go to this conference of all people that were working on our like US-based field staff. Second day on the job, mind you. This guy on our staff goes, "Hey, I'm so-and-so." I was like, "Hello, I'm Mariah. Nice to meet you. I'm new here." And he was like, "So what does sharing Jesus look like in your life?"
No.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh.
Welcome."
And I was like, "Well," and I kind of fumbled my way through the answer. And he was like, "Well, honestly, that's just not that great." And he was like, "You have so many opportunities." He was like, standing in line at Starbucks. I just turn around and I was a little taken aback. I was like, where am I working? But then I think it was this reality check of like, wait, where am I working? And what am I doing? And I think it has stuck with me.
Yeah, clearly.
And but it was so cool. And I think it's the fear of, well, what would they think of me?
Yeah.
And I don't want to put myself on the line to enter into those
Yeah.
conversations. And I think when I had the opportunity to go overseas with East West and sit across from someone and hear the response of like, who's Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
why would I not do this?
Yeah.
Like, who cares about me? And whatever came out of my mouth didn't matter. It was all going to be the Lord speaking through me and working in their heart, because that's what the Holy Spirit does. And I
Absolutely.
think when you do recognize that we have the opportunity to be a vessel,
Yeah.
and God like wants to partner with us in ministry, who knows why?
And that's what I love lately. I've been thinking about just God accomplishing his task. And he's
Yeah.
going to do it. It was said
Yeah.
the other day, it's not the great what if, it's the great certainty.
Mm.
It's the Great Commission is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's the imminent fulfillment of the gospel getting to the ends of the earth. And those of us who are willing to be used by him, even like you said, as you're fumbling your own beliefs, but willing to go and be used. It's awesome how God uses just, again, ordinary people in such unique ways. It's been so awesome being with you. I'm curious what you would say just to the person listening who is maybe still in the middle of their story, who's maybe they're on the part of their story where they're making some mishaps, where they're wondering, God, am I even qualified, or where is my life going? Or maybe they're through the journey a little bit, but not quite able to see if they're able to be used by God. What would you say to those people as they're fumbling along, trying to discover how God can use them in this mission that he's on?
I think it's just to be open and available and not hold anything too tightly. Some of the best wisdom I've ever received is don't hold anything tighter than you hold God. And I think that has really shaped my life to go, okay, it's you. Like, it's nothing else. It's not a plan. It's not a person. It's not a desire. It's you. And so if I'm wrestling, if I'm struggling, if I'm getting really hard, bad news, if, you know, I'm learning about a diagnosis or a disease or something in my family, it's like, okay, you're God. You're bigger than this. I have to like take myself back to my humanness and remind myself that this is God of the universe I'm serving. This is just a blimp in my eternity with him. And so if I'm confused, or if I'm struggling, or if I'm like even doubting, like I'm wrestling, I don't just want to give up. I want to continue to go back to the Lord. And I think creating space for him, creating an environment in myself where I'm constantly just going back to God, because he's going to show up. He's not going to disappoint us. And it's almost like taking disciplines in that moment and disciplining myself to go back to scripture even when I don't want to. And so that would be my advice and my encouragement is like, do the discipline, do the hard thing, work it out with the Lord, but be willing to hear what he has to say and the direction he wants to take you, because you're not going to be able to write it better for yourself.
Don't hold anything tighter than you hold God.
It's a good one.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for spending time with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
It's been
this was
hearing your
awesome.
story.
Appreciate it.
Well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I know I feel really encouraged. Scott, what do you feel like? What's sticking with you?
Well, it was awesome to hear just more about Freddie's story and all that God's doing in her life. You know, actually, towards the end of her story, you see all that God had done in preparation in her life and some unexpected turns. But it's cool to hear that moment where he kind of called her out of her comfort zone to move to West Monroe, Louisiana, to a place that, I mean, I could just pick up from her how hard that was. Like, God, are you really calling me to leave where I'm from and go there for this ministry, and see her take that step of faith? But just seeing how God's been faithful to do things in her and through her life that she never really thought possible. And so it's just cool to see the impact she's making, but really on the heels of that step of faith that she took to go to where God was calling her.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you have ever interviewed with me, I feel like I have probably said, I share this in almost every interview I have with a candidate. My like favorite part of my job is hearing someone recount their story of faith and life and their journey, and like hearing the fingerprints of God through the story. And so I think for me, as Freddie is one of my best friends, getting to sit across from her and hear her in a pretty short amount of time recount her story and God's faithfulness and where she's gone off track, and he's just been so faithful to run after her and bring her back. And how she had one idea for what her career would be, and he had a different idea, something better, something greater. I think seeing the fingerprints of God in her life from the very beginning, and just the way that she can recount that, and the gratitude and the excitement and just the trust that she has had in God. I think that is what has lingered with me, and yeah, it's just like such a privilege to get to see how God just continues to chase after his people.
Yeah, and cool part of her story is she's kind of just getting started.
Yeah.
I mean, in her ministry and in her outreach there. So awesome. Thanks, Freddie, for being on the podcast. Thanks to you, our listeners, for continuing on this journey with us as we tell stories of people who've said yes to extraordinary purpose. We'll see you next time on the Even You podcast. But until then, go be extraordinary.